Sign Facts, where every movie hides a secret. Every scene tells a deeper story. And every frame contains details most viewers never notice, from legendary blockbusters and mind-bending science fiction to dark thrillers, unforgettable horror, and hidden cinematic gems. We explore the facts, theories, Easter eggs, behind-the-scenes secrets, and untold stories that make movies truly unforgettable. This isn't just watching movies, this is discovering what lies beneath them. Subscribe to Sign Facts and step beyond the screen. Maximum Risk arrived during an important period in Jean-Claude Van Damme's career. While he was still a major box office attraction, Hollywood action cinema was evolving rapidly. Audiences were beginning to demand more complex characters and larger-scale productions. Maximum Risk helped demonstrate that Van Damme could handle roles requiring more dramatic depth while still delivering the action sequences fans expected. Although it didn't become his biggest commercial success, it remains one of the stronger performances of his career and is often praised by fans as one of his most underrated films. Playing opposite Van Damme is Natasha Henstridge, who portrays Alex Manetti. Henstridge was relatively new to Hollywood at the time. Born in Canada, she initially found success as a model before transitioning into acting. Her major breakthrough came in 1995 with the science fiction thriller Species, which became a major hit and introduced her to audiences worldwide. Her portrayal of the mysterious alien-human hybrid immediately established her as one of Hollywood's most recognizable new stars. By the time Maximum Risk entered production shortly afterward, she was viewed as one of the industry's rising talents. In Maximum Risk, Henstridge plays a woman caught up in the dangerous world surrounding Mikhail Suvorov. Her character serves as both a romantic interest and an important source of information for Alan as he tries to uncover the truth about his deceased twin brother. Rather than being a passive participant in the story, Alex often shows courage and resourcefulness when facing threats from organized crime figures. The role helped reinforce Henstridge's growing reputation as a capable actress within the action and thriller genres, while she went on to appear in other science fiction and action-oriented productions throughout her career. Maximum Risk remains one of the key films that established her as a leading actress during the mid-1990s. One of the film's most memorable supporting performances comes from Jean-Hugues Anglade as Sebastian. Anglade was already highly respected in European cinema before joining the cast. French audiences knew him from numerous dramatic performances, and he built a reputation as a versatile and talented actor. Sebastian is one of the film's more unpredictable characters operating within the criminal underworld. He constantly shifts between ally and potential threat. Anglade's performance adds tension and uncertainty throughout the story. His ability to balance charm, danger, and emotional instability makes Sebastian one of the film's most interesting supporting figures. Anglade's presence also helped reinforce the film's European identity since much of the story revolves around French characters and settings. His involvement brought additional authenticity to the production. Another important cast member is Zach Grenier, who portrays the ruthless Russian mobster Ivan Zakharov. Grenier had already established himself as a respected character actor in film, television, and theater, known for portraying intelligent, authoritative, and sometimes sinister figures. He brought credibility to the role of the film's primary antagonist. Zakharov serves as the driving force behind many of the movie's conflicts, representing the organized crime network that threatens both Alan and Alex throughout the story. Grenier's calm yet intimidating performance creates a villain who feels genuinely dangerous rather than relying on exaggerated behavior. He presents Zakharov as a calculating strategist whose power comes from influence and intelligence. The supporting cast also includes Stefanos Miltsakis as Redface, one of the film's most physically imposing villains. Miltsakis was an accomplished martial artist and kickboxer, making him an ideal opponent for Van Damme during the film's action sequences. His presence contributes to several memorable fight scenes and reinforces the physical stakes faced by the protagonist. When Maximum Risk was released in 1996, it entered a film industry undergoing major changes. The action genre, which had dominated much of the 1980s and early 1990s, was beginning to evolve. Audiences still loved explosive action sequences, martial arts battles, and larger-than-life heroes, but there was also growing demand for more sophisticated storytelling, international influences, and characters with emotional depth. Maximum Risk arrived at this transitional moment, and while it wasn't a groundbreaking blockbuster on the level of some of the era's biggest hits, it occupies an important place in the history of action cinema because it reflects several major trends that were reshaping the genre during the mid-1990s. One of the film's most significant contributions was its role in bringing Hong Kong filmmaking techniques into mainstream American cinema. Director Ringo Lam had already established himself as one of Hong Kong's most respected filmmakers. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, Hong Kong cinema was producing some of the most exciting action movies in the world. Directors such as John Woo, Tsui Hark, and Ringo Lam developed a style characterized by dynamic camera movement, intense action choreography, practical stunts, and emotional storytelling. During the 1990s, Hollywood increasingly turned to Hong Kong filmmakers for inspiration. American audiences had begun discovering Asian action cinema, and studios recognized the appeal of its unique visual energy. Maximum Risk became one of the earliest major examples of a Hong Kong action director being given the chance to direct a Hollywood action vehicle starring an established, marketable American star. The importance of this can't be overstated. Day to day, international collaboration is common throughout the film industry, but in the mid-1990s it was still relatively unusual. Maximum Risk helped demonstrate that action filmmaking styles developed outside Hollywood could successfully appeal to mainstream Western audiences. The film, therefore, represents an important step in the globalization of action cinema. Another aspect of the movie's historical significance lies in its portrayal of post-Cold War anxieties. The Soviet Union had collapsed only a few years earlier, in 1991. During the 1990s, many Hollywood thrillers shifted their focus away from traditional Cold War villains and began exploring new threats, particularly organized crime groups originating from Eastern Europe and the former Soviet republics. Maximum Risk reflects this cultural atmosphere through its Russian mafia storyline. The film presents a world in which criminal organizations have expanded across international borders, operating through complex networks that reach from Europe to North America. This concept resonated with audiences of the era because it mirrored concerns frequently discussed in the news media during the 1990s. The Russian mob became one of the defining villain archetypes of many action and crime films throughout the decade. Movies, television series, and novels increasingly featured Russian gangsters as antagonists. Maximum Risk participated in this trend while helping establish many of the visual and narrative conventions associated with these characters. The film's depiction of organized crime reflected contemporary fears about globalization, international crime syndicates, and the challenges facing law enforcement in an increasingly interconnected world. The film also arrived during a period when identity-based thrillers were becoming popular. Stories involving mistaken identity, twins, hidden family histories, and secret lives appealed strongly to audiences in the 1990s. Maximum Risk places these themes at the center of its narrative by having Jean-Claude Van Damme portray twin brothers who lived entirely different lives. This concept allowed the film to explore questions of fate, destiny, and personal choice. Viewers were invited to consider how different circumstances can shape two people who share the same genetics. While these themes had appeared in earlier films, Maximum Risk presented them within the framework of a modern action thriller, making them accessible to mainstream audiences seeking both excitement and emotional engagement. The dual role performance also reinforced one of Van Damme's most recognizable career trademarks. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, he became associated with films featuring doubles, twins, alternate identities, or mirror image characters. Earlier films such as Double Impact had already explored this concept, and Maximum Risk further strengthened the connection. For fans of action cinema, The movie became part of a larger collection of Van Damme films showcasing his ability to portray multiple versions of a character. This contributed to his unique screen persona and distinguished him from many of his contemporaries. While Schwarzenegger was known for larger-than-life heroes and Stallone for resilient underdogs, Van Damme often played characters grappling with questions of identity and self-discovery. Another important element of the film's cultural significance involves the changing expectations surrounding action stars themselves. During the 1980s, action heroes were often portrayed as nearly invincible figures. By the mid-1990s, audiences increasingly appreciated protagonists who displayed vulnerability, emotional conflict, and personal struggle. Maximum Risk reflects this shift. Alan Morrow isn't simply fighting criminals, he's investigating his own family history, confronting grief, and trying to understand a brother he never knew. The emotional stakes are therefore intertwined with the physical action. This approach anticipated trends that would become even more prominent in later decades, as action films increasingly emphasized character development alongside spectacle. The movie also holds significance within the broader arc of Van Damme's career. By 1996, he had already achieved global fame, but Maximum Risk demonstrated his willingness to take creative risks and pursue more ambitious material. The dual role required him to portray distinct personalities while carrying the film emotionally as well as physically. Although some critics focused primarily on the action sequences, many viewers recognized the film as an effort to expand Van Damme's acting range. Over time, this has contributed to its positive reputation among fans, who view it as one of his more mature performances. The production of Maximum Risk is one of the most fascinating stories in Van Damme's career, because it brought together filmmakers from very different cinematic traditions and attempted to blend their strengths into a single action thriller. Released in 1996, the film emerged during a period when Hollywood studios were increasingly interested in the energy and creativity coming out of Hong Kong cinema. Behind the camera, the movie became a unique experiment uniting American action filmmaking, European influences, and the distinctive visual style of one of Hong Kong's most respected directors, Ringo Lam. At the center of the production was Lam himself. Before arriving in Hollywood, he had already built a legendary reputation in Hong Kong. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, he directed numerous crime and action films that earned critical praise and commercial success. His movies were known for their gritty realism, intense violence, emotional storytelling, and morally complex characters. Unlike many action directors who focused solely on spectacle, Lam was deeply interested in the psychological struggles of his characters, often exploring themes such as loyalty, betrayal, identity, and survival. These qualities made him one of the most respected filmmakers in Hong Kong cinema and attracted the attention of Hollywood producers looking for fresh creative voices. The decision to hire Lam was part of a broader movement taking place in the film industry during the 1990s. Hollywood had begun recognizing the popularity of Hong Kong action films among international audiences, and studios wanted to incorporate the energy, pacing, and visual creativity that had made those films successful. Maximum Risk became one of the earliest major examples of this cross-cultural collaboration for Van Damme. The project gave him a chance to work with a director whose filmmaking style differed significantly from most of the directors he'd previously worked with. Van Damme was already a major action star by this point, but he reportedly appreciated Lam's focus on character development and emotional storytelling. One of the most ambitious aspects of production involved Van Damme's dual role. Playing twin brothers required extensive planning and technical preparation. While modern filmmakers often rely heavily on digital effects to create the illusion of one actor appearing twice in the same scene, Maximum Risk was produced before such techniques became commonplace. As a result, the crew used a variety of traditional filmmaking methods: split-screen photography, body doubles, carefully choreographed camera angles, and precise editing to create scenes in which Alan Morrow and Mikhail Suvorov appeared together. These techniques demanded significant attention to detail from both the actors and the technical crew. Many scenes had to be filmed multiple times. Van Damme would first perform one brother's role, then returned to perform the second brother's role while matching timing, movement, and dialogue perfectly. This process demanded patience and concentration, especially during scenes involving physical interaction between the twins. The dual-role concept also required Van Damme to develop two distinct performances. Alan Morrow needed to appear disciplined, cautious, and professional, while Mikhail Suvorov had to feel reckless, dangerous, and unpredictable. Costume choices, hairstyles, body language, and vocal delivery were all adjusted to help audiences distinguish between the two characters. The production team understood that the story's success depended on viewers believing they were watching two separate individuals rather than one actor performing two roles, and much of the film's behind-the-scenes effort went into achieving that illusion convincingly. Filming took place primarily in North America, with significant portions shot in Canada. Toronto served as one of the principal production locations. The city was becoming increasingly popular among Hollywood studios during the 1990s because it could convincingly stand in for various American cities while offering attractive production costs. Toronto's architecture provided a perfect backdrop for the film's urban thriller atmosphere. Office buildings, residential neighborhoods, industrial districts, and busy streets helped create a believable environment for the story's criminal underworld. The city's versatility allowed the filmmakers to depict multiple locations without requiring extensive travel. Several action sequences were filmed on location rather than on studio sets, reflecting Lam's preference for realism. He often favored practical locations because they added authenticity and visual texture to his films. Real streets, buildings, and public spaces created a sense of danger that would have been difficult to replicate on soundstages. One of the most memorable aspects of Maximum Risk is its action choreography. Unlike many Hollywood productions of the era, which frequently emphasized explosions and gunfire over physical combat, the film places considerable focus on hand-to-hand fighting, a natural fit for Van Damme's martial arts background. Lam encouraged a more grounded style of action than audiences might have expected from a typical Van Damme vehicle. While the film still contains spectacular moments, the fights often feel rough, chaotic, and dangerous. Characters become exhausted, injured, and vulnerable, and this realism heightens the tension and makes the action sequences more impactful. The production also benefited from skilled martial artists and stunt performers. Stefanos Miltsakis, who plays Redface, brought genuine combat experience to the role, allowing the filmmakers to stage intense confrontations without relying excessively on editing tricks or camera deception. Stunt work played a major role throughout filming. Many action scenes involved dangerous falls, vehicle chases, explosions, and close-quarters combat. Practical stunts were still the industry standard in the mid-1990s. Computer-generated imagery was available but far less advanced than it would later become, so stunt performers were responsible for executing many genuinely hazardous sequences. Maximum Risk tells a story that combines action, mystery, crime, and personal discovery into a fast-paced thriller that gradually reveals its secrets through a series of escalating dangers. While the film contains many of the action elements audiences expect from a Van Damme movie, its narrative structure is more complex than a typical action film of the era. Rather than focusing solely on a hero fighting villains, the story revolves around identity, family connections, hidden truths, and the consequences of living multiple lives. The result is a film that balances action sequences with an ongoing mystery driving the narrative forward from beginning to end. The story opens with the dramatic event that immediately establishes the film's central mystery. A man named Mikhail Suvorov is pursued through the streets of Nice, France. The opening sequence is designed to create intrigue rather than provide answers. Viewers quickly realize that Mikhail is involved in dangerous activities and is being hunted by powerful enemies. The chase ends in his death, a shocking moment that serves as the catalyst for everything that follows. This opening functions as what screenwriters often call the inciting incident, the event that disrupts the protagonist's normal world and sets the story in motion. However, there's an unusual twist. The man who dies isn't actually the film's main character. Instead, his death introduces the audience to a mystery that eventually leads to the true protagonist, Alan Morrow. Alan Moreau is a French police officer living a disciplined and relatively ordinary life. Shortly after Mikhail's death, Alan learns a remarkable secret. The dead man was his identical twin brother, separated from him at birth. Alan had never known his brother existed, and the revelation immediately changes his understanding of his own identity. This discovery serves as the first major turning point in the narrative. Rather than accepting the official explanation for Mikhail's death, Alan becomes determined to investigate further. His motivation isn't driven by revenge at first, but by curiosity and a desire to understand who his brother was, an emotional motivation that gives the story depth and provides a personal reason for Alan's increasingly dangerous actions. The first act focuses on Alan's investigation. As he examines Mikhail's belongings and traces his movements, he discovers evidence suggesting his brother had become involved in criminal activities in the United States. The clues point toward New York City, forcing Alan to leave the safety of his familiar environment and enter a dangerous world he barely understands. This transition is an important narrative device. Alan begins the story as a law enforcement officer operating within a structured, predictable environment. Once he travels to America, he enters an unfamiliar landscape where criminal organizations wield enormous power and trust becomes increasingly hard to establish. The audience experiences this transition alongside Alan, learning about Mikhail's hidden life piece by piece. The film also explores loyalty and betrayal, themes commonly found in crime thrillers, but handled here with unusual emotional depth. Nearly every major character faces questions about whom they can trust. Mikhail's criminal world is filled with deception, alliances shift constantly, and betrayal lurks behind many relationships. Criminal organizations maintain power through fear and manipulation rather than genuine loyalty. Alan enters this environment as an outsider and quickly discovers that appearances can be misleading. Characters who seem trustworthy may have hidden motives, while others who appear dangerous may prove surprisingly loyal. This atmosphere of uncertainty reinforces the film's suspense while supporting its broader themes about identity and truth. Just as Alan struggles to determine who Mikhail really was, he must also determine whom he can trust. Corruption serves as another important thematic element. The criminal organizations depicted in the film represent systems built on exploitation, violence, and abuse of power. These organizations extend their influence across national borders, illustrating how corruption can become entrenched within larger social structures. The Russian mafia functions symbolically as more than just a group of villains. It represents a world where morality has been replaced by greed and self-interest. Alan's investigation threatens this system because truth has the power to expose corruption and challenge established power structures. One of the most distinctive aspects of Maximum Risk is its visual presentation. While many viewers remember the film primarily for its action sequences and Van Damme's dual performance, a closer look reveals a carefully crafted visual style that sets it apart from many other action movies of the 1990s. Much of this uniqueness comes from Ringo Lam, whose background in Hong Kong cinema brought a different perspective to Hollywood filmmaking. Rather than relying solely on explosions and spectacle, Lam uses cinematography, lighting, camera movement, color, and composition to create tension, atmosphere, and emotional depth throughout the film. The visual identity of Maximum Risk is rooted in realism. Unlike many action films of the era that embrace bright colors, exaggerated heroism, and stylized fantasy, Lam sought to create a world that felt authentic and dangerous, reflecting the gritty crime thrillers he'd directed in Hong Kong during the 1980s and early 1990s. This realism is evident from the film's opening scenes. The camera often stays close to characters, emphasizing their vulnerability rather than their invincibility. Streets feel crowded and unpredictable, buildings appear worn and lived in. The environments aren't glamorous movie locations but believable urban spaces filled with potential danger. This grounded visual approach helps audiences connect more strongly with Alan's journey because the world feels real, the threats feel more immediate and the action feels more consequential. The cinematography frequently employs handheld camera techniques, particularly during chase sequences and tense moments. Handheld photography creates a sense of instability that mirrors the protagonist's situation. Alan is constantly entering unfamiliar territory, and the camera reflects that uncertainty. Instead of presenting action from a detached perspective, the audience is often placed directly inside the experience. The slight movements and imperfections of the handheld camera create a documentary-like quality that enhances realism. This technique became increasingly influential in later decades, but in the mid-1990s it still felt relatively fresh within mainstream action cinema. Lam understood how to use camera movement not simply to record action, but to immerse viewers in it. Another notable aspect of the cinematography is its use of close-ups. Throughout the film, the camera frequently focuses on faces, particularly during moments of emotional significance. This choice reinforces the story's themes of identity and self-discovery because Alan and Mikhail share the same face. Visual emphasis on facial expressions becomes especially important. Close-ups let audiences observe subtle differences between the two brothers even though both characters are played by Van Damme. Their emotional reactions, body language, and expressions help distinguish them. The camera often lingers on Alan as he processes new information about his brother's life. These moments briefly slow the pacing and let viewers experience his emotional journey alongside him rather than rushing from one action scene to the next. The film creates space for reflection. Lighting plays a crucial role in establishing mood throughout Maximum Risk. Much of the film uses low-key lighting, a technique involving strong contrast between light and shadow. This approach is particularly effective in the thriller genre because it creates an atmosphere of uncertainty and danger. Many scenes occur at night or in dimly lit interiors. Shadows dominate the frame, often obscuring details and creating visual tension. Characters frequently emerge from darkness or disappear into it, reinforcing the film's themes of hidden identities and concealed truths. The use of shadow also reflects Alan's investigation, as he literally moves through increasingly dark environments. The visual design mirrors the narrative progression from ignorance to knowledge. Color is another important component of the film's visual style. Unlike some action movies that rely on vibrant palettes, Maximum Risk generally favors subdued, restrained colors. Blues, grays, blacks, and muted earth tones dominate many scenes. This palette contributes to the film's serious tone. The cooler colors emphasize isolation, mystery, and danger, creating a world that feels emotionally distant and morally ambiguous. Occasionally, warmer colors appear during moments of personal connection or emotional revelation. These subtle shifts help guide audience emotions without drawing attention to themselves, and the restrained use of color demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of visual storytelling. Urban environments serve as a major visual motif throughout the film. Cities aren't merely backdrops for action sequences, they function almost as characters themselves. Streets, alleyways, apartment buildings, warehouses, and industrial areas create a sense of confinement and complexity. The architecture often emphasizes scale. Alan frequently appears small compared to the massive structures surrounding him, reinforcing the idea that he's confronting forces much larger than himself. The city also symbolizes the labyrinth-like mystery at the heart of the narrative. Every location contains clues, secrets, and potential threats, and the urban landscape becomes a physical representation of Alan's search for truth. Action scenes are filmed with remarkable clarity compared to many contemporary productions. Lam believed audiences should be able to understand exactly what's happening during moments of conflict, so the camera rarely becomes overly chaotic. Fight sequences often use medium shots and wider framing, letting viewers appreciate the performer's physical movements. Van Damme's martial arts abilities are showcased through carefully composed shots that highlight technique and athleticism rather than relying heavily on rapid editing. The film frequently allows action to unfold in longer takes, creating a stronger sense of authenticity because audiences can see the performers executing movements without excessive visual manipulation. While Maximum Risk is often praised for its action sequences, performances, and visual style, one of its most underrated strengths is its use of music and sound. The soundtrack and sound design play a crucial role in shaping the film's atmosphere, helping transform it from a standard action thriller into a tense, emotionally engaging cinematic experience. Ringo Lam understood that action isn't created through visuals alone. Sound can increase suspense, hide danger, deepen emotional moments, and make every punch, gunshot, and chase feel more impactful. Throughout Maximum Risk, music and sound work together to immerse the audience in Alan's journey and reinforce the film's central themes of identity, mystery, and survival. The musical score was composed by Robert Folk, a veteran composer whose career included numerous action, thriller, comedy, and science fiction films. By the time he joined Maximum Risk, Folk had already developed a reputation for energetic orchestral scores capable of supporting both large-scale action sequences and intimate character moments. For Maximum Risk, Folk created a score that balances suspense, drama, and excitement. Rather than overwhelming the audience with non-stop bombastic music, the soundtrack carefully adapts to the needs of each scene, allowing it to support both the action and the emotional aspects of the story. One of the score's most important functions is establishing mystery. At the beginning of the film, Alan knows very little about his twin brother Mikhail, and the audience shares that uncertainty. The music reflects this through darker tones, restrained orchestration, and subtle melodic patterns. Instead of immediately presenting a heroic theme, the score often emphasizes tension and curiosity, encouraging viewers to ask questions alongside Alan. Who was Mikhail? Why was he killed? What secrets was he hiding? These musical choices help transform the opening section of the film into a suspenseful investigation rather than a simple action story. As Alan uncovers more information, the score gradually evolves. New themes emerge reflecting his growing determination and emotional investment in the mystery, mirroring his character development and guiding the audience through his changing emotional state. A notable characteristic of the soundtrack is its orchestral foundation. During the mid-1990s, many action films were beginning to incorporate electronic music and synthesizer-driven sounds. While Maximum Risk includes some contemporary elements, its score remains largely rooted in traditional orchestral composition. Strings, brass, percussion, and woodwinds form the backbone of the musical experience. This gives the film a sense of scale and seriousness, elevating the narrative beyond simple action entertainment and adding emotional weight and dramatic intensity. The brass section is particularly effective during action sequences. Powerful horns and trumpets emphasize moments of danger and confrontation, and when Alan faces overwhelming odds, the music reinforces the stakes for the audience through both visual and auditory cues. Percussion plays an equally important role. Fast-paced rhythms frequently accompany chase scenes, fights, and moments of pursuit, and these rhythmic patterns build tension by creating a sense of momentum even before a character turns a corner or encounters a new threat. The percussion often signals that danger is approaching. The score is especially effective during scenes involving Alan's search for answers about his brother. Rather than relying solely on dialogue to communicate emotion, the music often fills in the gaps. Subtle melodies express grief, confusion, and curiosity in ways words can't. This emotional dimension matters because the film's central conflict isn't merely physical. Alan is struggling to understand a person who is both a complete stranger and part of his own family, and the music helps convey the complexity of these feelings. Another strength of the soundtrack is its restraint. Many action films use music almost continuously, but Maximum Risk frequently lets silence or minimal musical accompaniment dominate key scenes. These quieter moments create contrast and make the larger musical sequences more effective. When the score temporarily withdraws, audiences become more aware of environmental sounds, dialogue, and subtle details, increasing realism and preventing the music from becoming repetitive or overwhelming. The sound design itself is one of the film's most impressive technical achievements. Lam's preference for realism extends directly into the audio landscape. Gunshots, punches, footsteps, vehicle engines, and environmental noises all feel grounded and believable. Many action films exaggerate sound effects to unrealistic levels, but Maximum Risk generally avoids that approach, designing its sounds to create immersion rather than spectacle. This realism makes the action feel more dangerous, because viewers perceive the consequences of violence more clearly. Hand-to-hand combat scenes particularly benefit from the sound design. Every punch, kick, and impact carries weight, with the sound emphasizing physical effort as much as physical damage. Audiences hear characters breathing heavily, struggling, and growing exhausted. This attention to detail reinforces one of the film's key strengths, its portrayal of vulnerability. Alan isn't presented as an invincible superhero, and the sound effects remind viewers that every fight carries risk and consequence. Gunfire is handled with similar care. Different weapons produce distinct sounds, helping establish authenticity, with the sharp crack of a handgun differing noticeably from the deeper report of larger firearms. These variations contribute to the realism of the film's criminal underworld. Vehicle chases provide another showcase for the sound department. Engine noises, tire screeches, collisions, and environmental sounds combine to create dynamic, immersive sequences. The audience feels the speed and danger not only through visuals but through carefully layered audio. When Maximum Risk was released in September 1996, it entered a highly competitive cinematic landscape. The action genre was still enormously popular, but audience expectations were changing rapidly. The era of straightforward action heroes dominating every box office chart was beginning to fade as viewers increasingly demanded stronger stories, more developed characters, and larger-scale productions. Against this backdrop, Maximum Risk received a mixed initial reception from critics but found a more enthusiastic audience among action fans. Over the years, the film's reputation has improved considerably, and many now regard it as one of Van Damme's strongest films from the peak period of his career. At the time of release, critics generally acknowledged that Maximum Risk was attempting something more ambitious than the average action vehicle. Many reviewers noted that the film placed greater emphasis on suspense, mystery, and character development than audiences typically expected from a Van Damme production. The dual-role storyline and the involvement of respected Hong Kong director Ringo Lam attracted particular attention. Critical opinion, however, remained divided. Some reviewers appreciated the film's effort to blend action with emotional storytelling, while others felt it didn't fully capitalize on its intriguing premise. Several critics argued that the mystery surrounding the twin brothers was one of the movie's strongest elements and helped distinguish it from more formulaic action films. The performances received mixed but generally positive reactions. Van Damme's dual portrayal of Alan Morrow and Mikhail Suvorov became one of the most discussed aspects of the film. Critics who were often skeptical of his acting abilities acknowledged that the role demanded more range than many of his previous characters. For years, Van Damme had been primarily associated with martial arts action films where physical performance often took precedence over dramatic complexity. Maximum Risk gave him the chance to portray two distinct personalities and explore emotional themes related to family, loss, and identity. While some reviewers felt his dramatic range still had limitations, many agreed he delivered one of the stronger performances of his career. Action fans in particular appreciated seeing him attempt a more nuanced role, and the dual character structure let him demonstrate different aspects of his screen presence, with Alan Morrow thoughtful and restrained while Mikhail Suvorov was reckless and dangerous. The contrast between the two characters became one of the film's most praised features. Natasha Henstridge also received positive attention for her role as Alex Manetti. Following the success of Species the previous year, she was viewed as one of Hollywood's emerging stars, and critics generally found her performance effective, noting that she brought credibility and emotional depth to a character that could easily have been reduced to a standard action film love interest. Many reviewers appreciated that Alex was given meaningful involvement in the story rather than simply serving as a passive companion to the hero. Her relationship with Alan helped strengthen the emotional dimension of the narrative and provided important context about Mikhail's life. One area that received consistent praise was Ringo Lam's direction. Even critics with reservations about the screenplay often acknowledged the quality of the filmmaking itself. Lam's visual style, pacing, and handling of action sequences stood out from many contemporary Hollywood productions. Reviewers familiar with Hong Kong cinema recognized elements of Lam's earlier work. His emphasis on realism, tension, and character vulnerability distinguished Maximum Risk from the more exaggerated action movies of the period. The film's atmosphere was often described as darker and more serious than audiences might have expected from a typical Van Damme vehicle. The action scenes themselves were widely praised. By 1996, audiences had grown accustomed to increasingly large-scale action spectacles featuring elaborate visual effects. Maximum Risk instead focused on practical stunts, physical combat, and grounded suspense, an approach many critics appreciated. Fight sequences were often highlighted as some of the film's strongest moments because they felt authentic and intense, carrying a sense of danger sometimes missing from more fantastical action films. The practical stunt work also earned positive attention. Car chases, explosions, and physical confrontations were executed with a realism that enhanced audience immersion, and even critics less enthusiastic about the overall film often acknowledged the craftsmanship behind these sequences. Despite these strengths, the film wasn't without criticism. Some reviewers felt the screenplay relied too heavily on familiar action thriller conventions. While the twin brother premise was considered interesting, some critics felt the narrative followed predictable patterns once the mystery was established. Others argued that certain supporting characters were underdeveloped and that some plot points could have been explored more deeply. The film's blend of action and emotional storytelling occasionally created tonal inconsistencies for viewers who preferred one element over the other. A common criticism involved the pacing of the middle section. While many appreciated the investigative elements, some reviewers felt the narrative occasionally slowed as Alan pieced together information about Mikhail's life, and action fans expecting non-stop excitement sometimes found these scenes less engaging, even as viewers interested in the mystery considered them essential. Commercially, Maximum Risk performed reasonably well but didn't become one of the year's major blockbusters. It earned respectable box office returns and attracted a substantial audience, particularly among Van Damme's international fan base. Its financial performance reflected the broader challenges facing action stars during the mid-1990s as the genre remained popular, but competition was intense and audience tastes were evolving. The true measure of a film's significance is often not determined during its opening weekend but through its long-term influence and lasting reputation. In the case of Maximum Risk, its legacy has grown steadily over the years. Although it wasn't the biggest action blockbuster of 1996, the film has earned a respected place in the history of action cinema and remains one of the most highly regarded entries in Van Damme's filmography. Its influence can be seen in several areas, including the evolution of action filmmaking, the relationship between Hollywood and Hong Kong cinema, the continued popularity of practical stunt work, and the reassessment of Van Damme's career by both fans and critics. One of the most important aspects of the film's legacy is its role in the growing collaboration between Hollywood and Hong Kong filmmakers during the 1990s. Before Maximum Risk, Hong Kong action cinema had already developed a passionate international following. Directors such as John Woo, Tsui Hark, and Ringo Lam had created films admired for their innovative action choreography, kinetic camera work, and emotional storytelling. Hollywood studios increasingly recognized that audiences were responding positively to these styles, and as a result, several Hong Kong directors were invited to work on American productions. Maximum Risk became one of the most notable examples of this cultural exchange, demonstrating that a Hong Kong director could successfully adapt his filmmaking techniques to a major Hollywood action movie while preserving elements of his unique creative identity. This influence extended beyond the film itself, and the success of collaborations like Maximum Risk encouraged studios to continue seeking talent from international film industries. Today, global filmmaking partnerships are common, but movies like Maximum Risk helped pave the way for this more interconnected cinematic landscape. The film also contributed to the evolution of the action thriller genre. During the 1980s, many action movies focused almost entirely on physical conflict and straightforward narratives, with heroes often portrayed as nearly unstoppable figures whose primary function was to defeat villains through force. Maximum Risk introduced a greater emphasis on mystery, emotional complexity, and character psychology. Alan Moore's journey isn't simply about fighting criminals, it's about understanding his family history, discovering hidden truths, and confronting questions about identity. The action supports the story rather than replacing it. This approach anticipated trends that became increasingly common in later action films. Modern audiences often expect protagonists to possess emotional depth and personal motivations, and while Maximum Risk wasn't solely responsible for this shift, it stands as an early example of the genre moving in that direction. Another important aspect of the film's legacy involves its practical action sequences. Modern action cinema frequently relies on digital effects, computer-generated environments, and extensive post-production enhancement. While these technologies offer impressive possibilities, many viewers have developed a renewed appreciation for practical stunt work. Maximum Risk serves as a reminder of an era when action scenes were largely created through physical performances, real locations, practical explosions, and carefully choreographed stunts. The danger on screen often feels more immediate because audiences know real performers were executing many of the sequences. As discussions about action filmmaking have evolved, Maximum Risk has benefited from comparisons with modern productions. Many fans appreciate its commitment to authenticity and view it as an example of how practical techniques can create lasting excitement. The film's action scenes still feel tangible and believable decades after their creation. For Van Damme, Maximum Risk occupies a particularly important place in his career legacy. By the mid-1990s, he had already achieved global fame through films such as Bloodsport, Kickboxer, Universal Soldier, Time Cop, and Hard Target. But Maximum Risk allowed him to showcase abilities audiences didn't always associate with him. The dual role of Alan Moore and Mikhail Suvorov required him to portray two distinct personalities while carrying the emotional core of the story. Fans and critics who revisit the film often cite it as evidence that Van Damme possessed greater acting range than he was usually given credit for. As a result, Maximum Risk has become one of the key films referenced when discussing the most accomplished performances of his career, and helped broaden perceptions of what he could achieve as an actor, and remains one of the titles most commonly recommended to viewers seeking examples of his stronger dramatic work. The film's reputation has grown particularly strong among dedicated action cinema enthusiasts. Within fan communities, Maximum Risk is often described as an underrated gem. It's frequently included in discussions of overlooked action films of the 1990s and appears on many lists celebrating the decade's hidden classics. This cult status represents a significant part of the movie's legacy. Not every influential film achieves massive mainstream success. Some earn lasting appreciation through word-of-mouth recommendations, home video releases, and passionate fan support. Maximum Risk belongs firmly in this category. The film also helped strengthen Ringo Lam's reputation among Western audiences. Although he was already highly respected in Hong Kong, many American viewers were unfamiliar with his work before Maximum Risk. The movie introduced his directing style to a broader audience and encouraged some viewers to explore his earlier films. As appreciation for Hong Kong cinema expanded internationally, critics and film historians began examining Lam's Hollywood projects more closely. Maximum Risk is now frequently discussed as one of the strongest examples of his ability to balance action, suspense, and character development within the studio production. The movie's exploration of identity has also contributed to its enduring appeal. One of the most fascinating aspects of Maximum Risk is how audiences have interpreted the film over time. While critics and industry professionals often focus on technical achievements, narrative structure, or box office performance, the true life of a movie continues through the people who watch it. Since its release in 1996, Maximum Risk has generated a wide range of reactions from viewers, many of whom have developed a deeper appreciation for the film as the years have passed. Audience interpretations often reveal aspects of a movie that weren't fully recognized during its original theatrical run, and Maximum Risk is a perfect example of how a film can evolve in the minds of viewers across different generations. When audiences first encountered the movie in theaters, many approached it primarily as a Van Damme action film. By the 1990s, He had already established himself as one of the most recognizable action stars in the world, and viewers expected exciting fight scenes, martial arts combat, gun battles, and physical stunts. In this respect, Maximum Risk delivered exactly what many fans wanted. However, audiences quickly realized the film offered something a little different from a typical Van Damme vehicle. Rather than presenting a straightforward hero versus villain story, the movie centered on a mystery involving identity, family, and personal discovery. This additional emotional layer surprised many viewers and became one of the reasons the film developed a loyal following. For action fans of the 1990s, Alan Moore's journey often resonated because it combined familiar action elements with more personal stakes. The protagonist wasn't simply trying to save the world or defeat a criminal organization. He was attempting to understand a brother he never knew existed. This emotional motivation made the story feel more human and relatable. Many audience members interpreted Alan's search into Mikhail's past as a reflection of universal questions about family and identity. Even viewers who'd never experienced a similar situation could understand the desire to learn more about one's origins and the people connected to them. The mystery became more than a plot device, it became an emotional journey. Another common audience interpretation involves the concept of alternate lives. Alan and Mikhail share the same face, but their lives follow dramatically different paths, an idea that naturally invites viewers to imagine how their own lives might have turned out under different circumstances. Many fans have described the film as a story about possibilities. Alan represents one version of what a person could become, while Mikhail represents another. Their contrast encourages audiences to reflect on the role of fate, environment, and personal choice in shaping identity. This theme has remained particularly relevant across generations. Whether watching the film in 1996 or decades later, viewers often find themselves considering how small changes in life can lead to dramatically different outcomes. This philosophical dimension gives the movie a deeper emotional impact than many action thrillers. The film's portrayal of loneliness also resonated strongly with many audience members. Alan begins the story unaware that he has a twin brother. Once he discovers the truth, he realizes an important part of his life has been missing without his knowledge. Some viewers interpret this aspect of the story as a metaphor for the search for personal completeness. Alan isn't simply looking for answers about Mikhail, he's searching for a missing piece of himself. This interpretation adds emotional weight to his investigation and helps explain why audiences often connect with his journey. For many viewers, the relationship between Alan and Mikhail becomes the emotional heart of the film. Despite the fact that the brothers never meet, Alan gradually forms a connection with someone who is no longer alive, through photographs, stories, memories, and clues. Audiences frequently find this concept moving because it reflects real-life experiences of loss and missed opportunity. Many people have wondered what conversations they might have had with someone they never got the chance to fully know. The film transforms this universal feeling into a compelling narrative. Action enthusiasts often respond to Maximum Risk in a different but equally meaningful way. For these viewers, the movie represents a high point in practical action filmmaking. Unlike many modern action films that rely heavily on digital effects, Maximum Risk emphasizes real stunts, physical performances, and authentic locations. As audiences have become more familiar with CGI, appreciation for practical action has grown significantly. Many viewers revisiting the film today express admiration for its grounded approach. The fights feel real, the chases feel dangerous, and the physical risks appear genuine. This has led many action fans to view Maximum Risk as part of a golden era of stunt-driven filmmaking, often discussed alongside other action classics from the late 1980s and 1990s that prioritized physical performance over digital spectacle. The film's emotional tone has also generated interesting audience reactions. Some viewers interpret the story as surprisingly tragic. While the movie contains action and suspense, its foundation is built on loss. Alan discovers his brother only after Mikhail has died, and the possibility of a reunion never exists. This tragic dimension creates a sense of melancholy that lingers beneath the action, and some audience members have noted that the film feels more emotionally mature than many comparable action movies because it acknowledges the permanence of loss and the consequences of missed opportunities. Others view the story more optimistically. From this perspective, Alan's journey is ultimately one of growth and understanding. Although he can't meet Mikhail, he gains valuable knowledge about himself and his family, and the experience transforms him and deepens his appreciation for life and relationships. One of the strongest and most underrated aspects of Maximum Risk is its character development. While many action films of the 1990s focus primarily on spectacle, explosions, and physical confrontation, Maximum Risk places considerable emphasis on the personal journeys of its characters. The film's action sequences matter, but they serve a larger narrative centered on identity, transformation, loyalty, loss, and self-discovery. Through its central characters, the movie explores how people change when confronted with hidden truths, dangerous circumstances, and emotional revelations. The result is a story that remains engaging not only because of its action, but because of the meaningful character arcs that unfold throughout the narrative. At the center of the film is Alan Morrow, portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme. Alan begins the story as a relatively ordinary man. Despite his profession as a police officer, he lives a structured life built around rules, discipline, and routine. His identity is clear and uncomplicated. He understands who he is, what he does, and where he belongs. This stability is shattered when he learns he had an identical twin brother, Mikhail Suvorov, who recently died under mysterious circumstances. This revelation serves as the catalyst for Alan's entire character arc. Initially, Alan's motivation is simple curiosity. He wants to understand who his brother was and why nobody ever told him he existed. At this stage, he remains cautious and rational, and his investigation resembles the work of a police officer searching for facts. As the story progresses, however, the search becomes increasingly personal. Alan is no longer investigating a stranger. He's investigating a missing part of himself. The deeper he goes into Mikhail's world, the more emotionally invested he becomes. This transformation is central to Alan's development. He gradually shifts from observer to participant. What begins as an investigation evolves into a dangerous journey of self-discovery. Alan enters unfamiliar environments, confronts powerful enemies, and takes risks he would never have considered at the start of the story. One of the most interesting aspects of his arc is how he comes to understand Mikhail. Initially, Alan sees his brother as a criminal whose life choices were reckless and irresponsible. As he uncovers more information, his perspective changes. He learns that Mikhail's life was far more complicated than it appeared. Beneath the criminal activities was a man struggling to survive, protect people he cared about, and escape dangerous circumstances. Alan develops empathy for a brother he never met, and this growing understanding becomes a form of emotional growth. He learns to abandon simplistic judgments and appreciate the complexity of human lives. By the end of the film, he no longer sees Mikhail merely as a criminal or a victim. He sees him as a fully realized individual shaped by difficult circumstances. Physically, emotionally, and psychologically, Alan emerges from the experience transformed. He becomes more confident, more adaptable, and more willing to embrace uncertainty. The man who completes the journey is significantly different from the man who began it. Mikhail Suvorov presents a unique challenge as a character because he's already dead when the story begins. Yet despite his limited screen time, he remains one of the most important figures in the narrative. Through flashbacks, conversations, photographs, and discoveries, audiences gradually build a picture of who Mikhail was. In many ways, his character develops posthumously as Alan learns more about him. Viewers do too. At first, Mikhail appears to fit the stereotype of a dangerous criminal, associated with organized crime, violence, and illegal activity. But each new revelation complicates that image. The audience discovers that Mikhail was attempting to escape his criminal environment. He had begun questioning the life he was living and was searching for a way out. This realization transforms him from a simple plot device into a tragic figure. Mikhail's arc is therefore one of redemption. Although he doesn't survive long enough to complete the journey himself, his efforts to change ultimately inspire Alan. Through his death, Mikhail becomes a catalyst for his brother's moral and emotional growth. The relationship between Alan and Mikhail forms the emotional core of the film. Despite never sharing a scene together, their connection exists through discovery, memory, and reflection rather than direct interaction, an unusual dynamic that creates one of the film's most compelling themes. Alan spends the story reconstructing Mikhail's life piece by piece, and in doing so, forms a relationship with someone he never had the chance to meet. The brothers function as reflections of one another. They share the same appearance but represent different life paths. Alan repeatedly asks himself what might have happened had their circumstances been reversed, a comparison that forces him to confront questions about identity, fate, and personal choice. This relationship drives both the narrative and Alan's character development. Alex Manetti, portrayed by Natasha Henstridge, also experiences meaningful growth throughout the story. She begins as someone deeply connected to Mikhail's world, aware of the danger surrounding him and the risks built into their environment. When Alex first encounters Alan, she mistakes him for Mikhail, and this misunderstanding creates confusion and emotional conflict. She must gradually accept that the man standing before her is both familiar and entirely different. Alex's development revolves around trust. Living in a world dominated by crime and deception has taught her to be cautious. Trusting others is dangerous, and betrayal is common. As the story unfolds, Alan earns her confidence through his honesty and determination. Although Maximum Risk is primarily remembered as an action thriller, its costume and set design play a crucial role in shaping the film's atmosphere, storytelling, and character development. Great production design often works subtly, influencing audience perception without drawing attention to itself. In Maximum Risk, every costume choice, location, interior space, and visual environment helps communicate information about the characters and their social status, emotional state, and place within the story. Ringo Lam and his creative team understood that visual details could strengthen the narrative just as effectively as dialogue or action sequences, and the result is a film whose design elements contribute significantly to its realism, tension, and emotional depth. One of the most important challenges in the costume department involved Van Damme's dual role as Alan Morrow and Mikhail Suvorov. Because both characters share the same face, costumes became a vital tool for distinguishing them, and the audience needed to recognize immediately which brother they were watching, even before dialogue or plot details clarified the situation. Alan's wardrobe reflects his identity as a police officer and a disciplined individual. His clothing tends to be practical, conservative, and functional, in restrained colors, darker tones and neutral shades that communicate professionalism and stability. These choices reinforce Alan's orderly lifestyle. He's a man who values structure, responsibility, and control, and his appearance reflects a life governed by routine and discipline. The wardrobe helps establish him as someone grounded in law and social order. In contrast, Mikhail Suvorov's clothing reflects a much different personality and lifestyle. His wardrobe often appears more stylish, expensive, and expressive, suggesting someone operating in a world of risk, money, crime, and constant uncertainty. Mikhail's clothing communicates confidence and danger. He isn't bound by the same professional expectations governing Alan's life, and his wardrobe reflects greater freedom, but also greater recklessness. Through costume alone, viewers gain insight into the radically different lives these identical brothers have lived. As Alan gradually steps into Mikhail's world, the costumes take on additional symbolic meaning. Alan begins wearing clothing associated with his brother, creating a visual representation of his journey into an unfamiliar identity. This transformation is subtle but important as the audience watches Alan literally and figuratively assume aspects of Mikhail's life. Costume design becomes a storytelling device reinforcing the film's central themes of identity and self-discovery. The contrast between the brothers isn't exaggerated. Instead, the designers chose realistic distinctions that feel natural, and this restraint contributes to the film's grounded atmosphere and helps maintain audience immersion. Natasha Henstridge's character, Alex Manetti, also benefits from thoughtful costume design. Alex exists within the dangerous world surrounding Mikhail, yet she isn't portrayed as a stereotypical action movie companion. Her wardrobe reflects both vulnerability and independence. Many of her outfits are practical enough to function within the story's action-oriented environment while still conveying personality and individuality. The clothing suggests someone accustomed to navigating difficult circumstances but unwilling to surrender her sense of self. Alex's appearance evolves throughout the film as her situation grows increasingly dangerous. Forced to flee, hide, and survive alongside Alan, practicality begins to take precedence over style. This gradual change reflects the escalating stakes of the narrative. The villains are likewise defined through costume choices. Members of the Russian criminal organization often wear dark suits and expensive coats, a carefully selected clothing that communicates authority and power. Their appearance reinforces their position within a hierarchy built on wealth, influence, and intimidation. Ivan Zakharov, the film's primary antagonist, dresses in a manner that emphasizes control and sophistication. His wardrobe reflects someone who operates from a position of power rather than physical strength alone. He doesn't need flashy displays because his authority is already established. This visual distinction sets him apart from lower-ranking criminals. The costume design quietly communicates status without requiring explicit explanation through dialogue. Set design is equally important throughout Maximum Risk. Ringo Lam preferred realistic environments over highly stylized sets, and this philosophy is evident in every major location. The film's world feels authentic because it's populated with spaces that appear genuinely lived in rather than artificially constructed. The urban environments are among the most significant visual elements in the movie. Streets, alleyways, apartment buildings, warehouses, offices, and industrial areas create a believable setting for the story's criminal underworld. These locations contribute to the film's atmosphere of uncertainty and danger. The city becomes a maze filled with hidden threats, secret connections, and unanswered questions, and every location Alan enters carries the possibility of discovery or confrontation. One of the most important sets is Mikhail's apartment, which functions almost as a physical representation of the character himself. Alan explores the space searching for clues, and the audience learns about Mikhail through the objects surrounding him. Photographs, furniture, personal belongings, and decorative choices reveal aspects of his personality and lifestyle. The apartment becomes a narrative device that lets the deceased character continue influencing the story. The contrast between Alan's environment and Mikhail's environment reinforces the differences between their lives. Alan's world is organized and predictable, while Mikhail's feels more chaotic and uncertain. The criminal meeting places featured throughout the film are designed to emphasize secrecy and power. The screenplay of Maximum Risk occupies an interesting place within the action genre of the 1990s. While the film contains all the expected ingredients of a major action thriller, gunfights, martial arts combat, car chases, criminal conspiracies, and dangerous villains, its script attempts to offer more than simple spectacle. The screenplay combines mystery, emotional drama, suspense, and action into a narrative driven as much by questions of identity and family as by physical conflict. Although Maximum Risk isn't remembered primarily for iconic one-liners the way some action classics are, its dialogue and script writing play a crucial role in establishing character relationships, building tension, and supporting the film's deeper themes. One of the screenplay's greatest strengths is its central premise. The idea of a man discovering he had an identical twin brother only after that brother's death immediately creates dramatic possibilities, giving the film an emotional foundation many action movies lack from the outset. The screenplay uses mystery as its primary narrative engine. Alan Morrow doesn't know who Mikhail Suvorov was, and neither does the audience. The script gradually reveals information through conversations, clues, discoveries, and encounters with people who knew Mikhail, transforming the movie into a detective story as much as an action film. The dialogue serves this investigative approach effectively rather than relying on lengthy exposition dumps. The screenplay often lets information emerge naturally through character interactions. Alan learns pieces of the puzzle one step at a time, and viewers learn alongside him. This gradual release of information helps maintain suspense. Every conversation potentially contains a clue or revelation, so even scenes without action contribute to the overall sense of momentum. Alan Moore's characterization is strongly supported through dialogue. At the start of the film, he speaks with the confidence and professionalism expected of a police officer. His conversations tend to be direct, logical, and focused. As the story progresses and he becomes increasingly involved in Mikhail's world, subtle changes appear in the way he communicates. His questions become more personal, his emotional investment more apparent. He begins speaking not only as an investigator, but also as a brother seeking answers. This evolution helps track Alan's emotional journey, as the screenplay doesn't rely solely on action to demonstrate his development. His dialogue reflects the growing complexity of his feelings about Mikhail and the dangerous world surrounding him. One of the most interesting screenwriting challenges involved the duo role played by Van Damme. Because Alan and Mikhail share the same appearance, the screenplay needed to create clear distinctions between them through behavior, attitude, and dialogue. Although Mikhail appears less frequently, the conversations involving him establish a very different personality. His speech patterns suggest someone accustomed to operating in dangerous environments, and he often comes across as more confident, more reckless, and less constrained by rules. The contrast between the brothers is crucial because it reinforces the film's central themes through dialogue alone. Audiences gain insight into how differently these men approach life despite sharing the same genetic foundation. Alex Manetti's dialogue serves multiple functions within the screenplay. On a practical level, she provides Alan with information about Mikhail and his activities. But her conversations also help humanize the story, and many action films struggle to balance action with emotional depth, and Alex's interactions with Alan help bridge that gap. Through their conversations, the audience gains a clearer understanding of Mikhail's personal life, fears, hopes, and relationships. The dialogue between Alan and Alex gradually shifts from suspicion to trust. Initially, confusion dominates their interactions because Alex mistakes Alan for Mikhail. Once the truth emerges, their conversations become more emotionally honest. This progression feels natural because the screenplay allows trust to develop over time rather than forcing an immediate connection, and their relationship becomes one of the emotional anchors of the film. The villains are also defined effectively through dialogue. Ivan Zakharov, the leader of the criminal organization, isn't written as a loud or theatrical antagonist. Instead, his dialogue emphasizes intelligence, authority, and control. Many of his most effective moments come not from threats or violence but from calm, measured conversation. This restraint makes him more intimidating, because he appears confident enough to remain composed under pressure. The screenplay understands that true power often speaks quietly. Zakharov rarely needs to raise his voice, because his position within the criminal hierarchy already commands obedience. This approach creates a more believable and sophisticated villain than many action films of the period offer. Sebastian provides another example of strong character writing. His dialogue frequently contains ambiguity, making it difficult for both Alan and the audience to determine his true intentions. At various points, Sebastian appears helpful, dangerous, loyal, manipulative, and unpredictable. The screenplay uses dialogue to maintain this uncertainty, as words often carry multiple meanings, forcing viewers to question whether he can be trusted. This ambiguity contributes significantly to the film's suspense. In a story built around hidden identities and concealed motives, characters shouldn't always be entirely transparent, and Sebastian's dialogue reflects that complexity. Humor is present in the screenplay, but it's used sparingly. Unlike many action movies of the 1980s and 1990s that relied heavily on comedic one-liners, Maximum Risk adopts a more serious tone when humor does appear. It usually emerges naturally from character interaction rather than feeling forced. The marketing campaign for Maximum Risk was designed during a fascinating period in Hollywood history. By 1996, action films remained one of the most commercially successful genres in the world. But the marketplace had grown increasingly competitive. Studios were investing larger budgets in action productions, audiences had more entertainment choices than ever before, and major stars were competing for attention in crowded release schedules. In this environment, the promotional strategy for Maximum Risk needed to accomplish several goals at once: capitalize on Van Damme's global popularity, introduce the involvement of acclaimed Hong Kong director Ringo Lam, highlight the film's action sequences, and differentiate the movie from dozens of other thrillers released during the same period. The foundation of the campaign was Van Damme himself. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, he'd become one of the most recognizable action stars in the world. Films such as Bloodsport, Kickboxer, Universal Soldier, Hard Target, and Time Cop had transformed him into a major international attraction. As a result, much of the promotional material focused heavily on his presence. Studio executives understood that his name alone could attract a large audience, particularly among action fans. Posters, trailers, magazine advertisements, and television spots prominently featured his image. The campaign presented Maximum Risk as a major Van Damme event, encouraging viewers to expect the martial arts skills, physical combat, and high-energy action associated with his brand. This strategy made sense, since many moviegoers were already familiar with his previous work and trusted him to deliver exciting entertainment. One of the most effective promotional elements involved the film's twin brother premise. The concept of Van Damme portraying two characters immediately provided a unique selling point. While audiences had seen him play multiple roles before, the dual identity storyline remained an intriguing hook. Promotional materials emphasized mystery as well as action, rather than simply showing explosions and fight scenes. Trailers often highlighted the questions surrounding Alan Morrow and Mikhail Suvorov, inviting audiences to uncover the truth behind the brothers and the circumstances connecting them. This approach helped distinguish Maximum Risk from more straightforward action films, suggesting that viewers would experience not only physical excitement but also a suspenseful mystery. The theatrical poster remains one of the most recognizable aspects of the film's promotional campaign. Like many action movie posters of the era, it featured a dramatic image of Van Damme positioned prominently at the center of the composition. The design communicated danger, intensity, and suspense while reinforcing the film's central themes of identity and confrontation. Dark colors, dramatic lighting, and action-oriented imagery helped establish the movie's tone before audiences ever entered the theater. Movie posters served a particularly important function during the 1990s, since digital marketing didn't yet exist. They appeared in theaters, shopping centers, magazines, newspapers, and public spaces, often serving as the first point of contact between the film and potential viewers. The Maximum Risk poster successfully communicated the genre, star power, and overall atmosphere of the movie within a single image. The trailer campaign played an equally important role. Trailers for action films in the 1990s followed a fairly recognizable structure, and Maximum Risk was no exception. The preview quickly introduced the mystery surrounding the twin brothers before transitioning into a series of increasingly spectacular action sequences. Fast editing, dramatic music, explosions, gunfights, car chases, and martial arts confrontations dominated the trailer, elements carefully selected to appeal directly to action enthusiasts. Importantly, the trailer avoided revealing too many of the story's major twists, focusing instead on creating intrigue. Viewers were given enough information to understand the basic premise, but not enough to solve the mystery. This balance between information and secrecy is one of the most important aspects of effective trailer design, and the Maximum Risk promotional team clearly understood that suspense was one of the film's greatest strengths, seeking to preserve that experience for audiences. Television advertising represented another major component of the campaign. During the mid-1990s, TV commercials remained one of the most powerful tools available to film marketers. Short 30 and 60-second advertisements were broadcast during sports events, popular television programs, and other high-visibility time slots, condensing the movie into a rapid series of memorable moments designed to capture viewer attention immediately. Because television advertising was expensive, marketers focused on the most visually impressive material. Explosions, fights, dramatic confrontations, and suspenseful scenes dominated these spots. The campaign also benefited from media interviews and promotional appearances. Van Damme took part in interviews discussing the film, his dual role, and his collaboration with Ringo Lam. These appearances served multiple purposes. They helped maintain public awareness of the movie while also letting Van Damme present the project as something more ambitious than a typical action vehicle. Journalists frequently asked about the challenge of playing twin brothers, giving him opportunities to discuss the emotional side of the story, which helped position Maximum Risk as a film containing both action and character development. The involvement of Ringo Lam became a secondary but important promotional angle. While mainstream audiences may not have immediately recognized his name, dedicated action fans and film enthusiasts were familiar with his reputation. Publicity materials occasionally emphasize that the film was directed by an internationally respected filmmaker known for intense crime dramas and action thrillers, helping generate interest among viewers seeking something beyond conventional Hollywood action. To fully understand the significance of Maximum Risk, it helps to compare it with other films of the era, other Van Damme projects, and the broader body of work directed by Ringo Lam. Comparative analysis reveals what makes the film unique and why it continues to occupy a respected position within the action genre. While Maximum Risk shares many characteristics with other action thrillers of the 1990s, it also distinguishes itself through its tone, storytelling approach, character development, and visual style. Examining these similarities and differences helps explain why the film remains one of the most appreciated entries in Van Damme's career. Perhaps the most obvious comparison is with Double Impact, the 1991 Van Damme film in which he also played twin brothers. On the surface, the two movies appear remarkably similar, as both feature Van Damme portraying identical siblings separated by circumstance and forced to confront dangerous enemies. However, the tone and purpose of the two films differ considerably. Double Impact embraces the larger-than-life style associated with many action movies of the early 1990s. The story is built around revenge, explosive action, and exaggerated personalities, and the twin brothers are intentionally contrasted in dramatic ways that create opportunities for humor, action, and spectacle. Maximum Risk approaches the twin concept much more seriously, rather than focusing primarily on revenge or excitement. It uses the existence of the twin brothers as a vehicle for exploring identity and self-discovery. Alan Morrow spends much of the film investigating Mikhail's life rather than interacting directly with him, and as a result, Maximum Risk feels more mature and emotionally complex. The twin relationship functions as a mystery rather than merely a source of action-oriented entertainment, and many fans consider it the more sophisticated of Van Damme's duo-role performances. Another useful comparison is with Time Cop, one of Van Damme's most commercially successful films. Released in 1994, Time Cop combined action with science fiction and became one of the actor's biggest box office hits. Both films feature protagonists confronting alternate versions of themselves. In a thematic sense, in Time Cop, the concept is explored through time travel. In Maximum Risk, it's explored through the existence of a twin brother living a completely different life. The major difference lies in their storytelling priorities. A Time Cop focuses heavily on futuristic concepts, action spectacle, and large-scale stakes, while Maximum Risk remains grounded in realism, with emotional conflicts that feel more personal and intimate. While Time Cop asks what would happen if someone could change the past, Maximum Risk asks how a person's life might differ if their circumstances had been altered from birth. Both films explore identity, but from different directions. Hard Target, released in 1993 and directed by John Woo, offers another interesting comparison. Like Maximum Risk, it represented a collaboration between Van Damme and a celebrated Hong Kong action director. The influence of Hong Kong cinema is visible in both films, but the two directors bring distinct styles. Woo is known for highly stylized action sequences, dramatic slow motion, symbolic imagery, and elaborate gun battles, and Hard Target embraces these qualities fully. Ringo Lam, by contrast, prefers realism, as action scenes feel rougher, more immediate, and less theatrical. Maximum Risk contains exciting action but rarely becomes as operatic as Hard Target often does. This difference highlights two separate approaches to action filmmaking. Woo emphasizes spectacle and visual poetry, while Lam emphasizes tension and authenticity. Both methods are effective, but they create very different viewing experiences. Comparisons with Universal Soldier are also revealing. Released in 1992, Universal Soldier focuses on enhanced soldiers, science fiction concepts, and large-scale military action, presenting Van Damme as a character struggling to recover lost memories and reclaim his humanity. In some ways, Maximum Risk explores similar territory. Alan Morrow isn't trying to recover his own memories, but he is attempting to reconstruct the life of his brother.